Today's story is so cold and relentless, it will leave you holding your breath. Set deep in the American West, where the wind cuts like a blade and the mountains glow blood red at sundown. It's a place where justice and vengeance ride the same narrow trail, and a single decision can echo louder than a gunshot. It begins with a freight station robbery, just another act of outlaw violence. But it ends with a brother's body in the dust, and a promise that will drag a lawman into the frozen heart of the Bitterroots. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The last light of day spilled out across the jagged spine of the Bitterroots, washing the snow-capped peaks in a dark, brooding red. Rhett Kincade stood alone along the narrow ridge, boots buried deep in wind-hardened drifts. The brim of his hat leaned into a wind sharp enough to slice through hide. The air carried the scent of iron and pine pitch. Every breath burned cold in his chest. His gaze never left the canyon below, where pine shadows stretched long and crooked over the frozen creek like reaching fingers. Somewhere down there, the men who murdered his brother were moving. And tonight, Rhett meant to find them before they found him. The ridge groaned beneath winter's weight, timber snapping, stones shifting under ice. A lone wolf's howl drifted through the dusk, long and aching, before fading into the mountainside. Rhett's hand hovered near the worn grip of his Colt. He had spent a year chasing the Cutter outfit across territory lines, following rumors that scattered like dust in high wind. Every trail died quiet. Every night ended the same way, awake, staring into the dark, hearing Ansel Kincaid's voice calling his name before everything went black. It had been late summer when the news reached him. Rhett had been riding the far edge of Dry Creek, the smell of sunburnt sage thick in the heat, when Corby Flint came tearing over the hills, pale as bleached bone. "Sheriff," the boy gasped. "They hit the freight station. Your brother—" He didn't finish. Rhett rode hard enough to blind himself with dust. By the time he reached the station, it was splintered timber and silence. Ansel lay beneath a fallen beam, shirt soaked dark with blood, eyes fixed on an endless blue sky that gave nothing back. The Cutter outfit had left their signature behind, spent shells scattered in the dirt and a scrap of paper pinned to a post with a Bowie knife. "Catch us if you can." Rhett stayed kneeling there until the sky burned orange and flies settled in. Ansel had been 24, all crooked grin and easy laughter. A better rider, faster with a draw. But he'd only ever used that speed at county fairs, never in anger. It wasn't the blood that haunted Rhett. It was that grin. He remembered Ansel saying once, "You hold the law, Rhett. I'll hold the land. Between us, Kincade blood keeps this valley steady." Now half that promise lay buried in dust. The months that followed blurred into saddle sores and sleepless towns. Rhett tracked whispers through Idaho, Montana, even as far as the Dakotas. He pressed drifters, gamblers, worn-down men who owed Bram Cutter favors. Each rumor dragged him farther from home. A shadow at a river crossing, a whiskey-soaked boast in a saloon, smoke fading on a distant ridge. Some nights he swore he could still smell Ansel's blood on the wind. Other nights, he feared he was hunting ghosts, and his own rage more than flesh and bone. Winter drove him into the Bitterroots. Black and silver mountains rose around him, their canyons slick with ice. He stayed because he knew Cutter would use the hidden passes before spring thaw. Back in Dry Creek, Tobin Slade had begged him to come home. "Law can't run on vengeance," Tobin had warned. Rhett gave no answer. He still wore the badge, but the line between sheriff and grieving brother had thinned to smoke. He shifted his stance and studied the valley again. Moonlight glazed the frozen creek. Snow hung heavy in the air. Every sound sharpened, the snap of a twig, the wingbeat of an owl. The world felt like it was holding its breath. He remembered climbing the old cottonwood with Ansel as boys, daring each other to see the whole valley from the top. He remembered Rhett Kincade smoothing Ansel's hair, telling them softly, "Look after each other." Rhett had promised. Now he promised something darker, that the cutter outfit would face justice, rope or bullet. Far below, a flicker of light shifted between the trees. Rhett crouched low, heart pounding. Lantern? Or moonlight on ice? He waited, nerves strung tight. Then the wind carried it, low voices threading through the pines, rough laughter, the clink of metal against canteen. His jaw hardened. He pictured Bram Cutter, eyes cold as polished obsidian, his brothers beside him, grinning through cruelty. He pictured Ansel there too, not as a ghost, but as the steady weight behind Rhett's aim. A gust swept snow over his boots. He thought about the oath he'd sworn, the fragile border between justice and revenge. In the stillness, he heard his own heartbeat. Steady, deliberate. Maybe he wasn't the same man who'd stood in Dry Creek's courthouse believing the badge meant more than a gun. Maybe he'd become something else. A shape cut from frost and loss. Still, grief trembled beneath the steel. He remembered Ansel's last imagined words. Rhett will come. That steadied him. If he acted tonight, it would be for memory, not fury. He whispered into the dark, asking for a steady hand and a heart that wouldn't turn to stone. Below, the lantern glow separated into 3 distinct lights moving along the creek. Rhett counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. Exactly what he'd been told remained. Hoofbeats thudded faint against frozen ground, echoing deep in his chest. He touched the brim of his hat in silent promise. Above him, the sky deepened to indigo. Stars punched through like nailheads in black iron. Earlier that day, Deke Rowan had brought word. The cutter outfit cutting through Cold Water Pass before the thaw. It was the first solid lead in months, the last before snow erased everything. Night wrapped around him as Rhett Kincade waited in mountain shadow. The badge rested cold against his chest, but Ansel's memory burned hotter than the wind. He lowered the brim of his hat and let the dark fold around him like a vow. Dawn crept in pale and silver. Rhett moved through the timber quiet as breath. Frost cracked underfoot. The creek lay sealed in ice, black water threading beneath like veins. He crouched near the bank and brushed a fresh boot print in the snow. Narrow heel, clean edge, recent. He could almost feel the weight of the man who made it. Smell leather and sweat lingering in the cold. A torn saddle strap hung from a branch nearby. Rhett rolled it between his fingers, fresh cut, not frozen yet. His pulse sharpened. Bram Cutter had never been closer. A year of dead-end rumors had taught him patience. But this sign was too clear. They were heading south, hugging the ridge toward Idaho's crooked passes. Lose them now, and winter would bury justice beneath drifts until spring. Rhett rose and pressed forward. His instincts sharpened until every breath felt edged with steel. The wind carried resin from the pines and the faint trace of smoke drifting somewhere ahead. Not imagination. Real. Close. Rhett Kincade found the remains of a camp tucked between slabs of rock. A fire nearly dead, its ashes still whispering heat. He crouched low, brushing his palm across blackened wood. 3 men, maybe 4. The fire had been built for more than one rider. Boot tracks scarred the ground. A dented tin cup lay on its side. Someone had kicked snow over the coals in a hurry. They were pushing hard. A shift in the wind brought the muted clank of metal. Rhett followed it through thinning timber until the trees gave way to a tight clearing. There, beside a sway-backed mule, a weathered miner chipped at frozen quartz. His beard hung thick against his chest, smoke gray and tangled. When his eyes met Rhett's, They shone sharp and wary. "Morning?" Rhett called, voice calm but edged. The old man leaned on his pickaxe. "Morning's about spent, stranger." Rhett rested a hand near his colt. "You see 3 riders come through? Rough-looking, armed heavy." The miner spat into the snow. "Saw 'em at first light. Didn't tip their hats. Didn't slow none." He nodded toward the west. One wore a coat black as a crow's wing, rode like he owned the trail. Rhett's pulse tightened. "Headed where?" "Cold Water Pass," the man replied. "Only route worth taking this time of year. Storm's building, though. Sky's turning mean." The miner was Amos Breyer. Rhett recognized him now. Lived half his life clawing at stone. Rhett gave a curt nod and moved on, the warning settling deeper than the weather. Out west, the horizon bruised purple. Clouds stacked like fortress walls, the air thickened with the metallic promise of snow. Rhett pulled his coat close, and memory rose uninvited. Ansel at 10, riding bareback along Dry Creek, laughing when the pony bucked. Ansel at 16, ribbing him about courting the mayor's daughter. The morning of the freight station robbery, Ansel had asked him to ride along, just for the company. Rhett had refused, said he had fence trouble east of town. That single choice gnawed at him like a blade. If he'd gone, maybe Bram Cutter would have hesitated. Maybe Ansel would still be breathing. The thought lodged behind his ribs like frozen iron. Snow began falling at dusk, thin flakes at first, then heavier, turning the world pale and muted. Rhett's breath rolled out in white plumes. At a fork in the trail, he spotted a distant glow flickering through the storm. He nudged his horse forward. The light belonged to a lone homestead, a squat ranch house crouched under a sagging roof burdened with snow. Smoke twisted from the chimney. A lantern burned on the porch, casting weak gold across the drifted yard. Rhett dismounted. Before he knocked, the door opened. A woman stood framed in warm light, shotgun steady in her arms. Young, 30 maybe. Pale from cold, but unflinching. "I'm not here for trouble," Rhett said, tipping his hat. Rhett